Your Honor. Janelle's voice trembled as she rose from her seat, holding a framed picture of her son so tightly her knuckles were white. The picture was of Garrison Brown, grinning widely in his military attire. This isn't a case about an accident. It's a case about a lifetime of neglect, control, and broken promises. The words lingered in the air like the crack of thunder. The courtroom fell silent. The kind of silence that felt thick, almost desperate. You could hear the distant whir of the ceiling fan, the scratching of a reporter's pen, even the creak of someone fidgeting in their seat. But no one was brave enough to utter a word. Everyone's attention turned to Kody Brown, sitting at the defense table. Kody sat rigidly, arms crossed on his chest, jaw clenched so tightly that it appeared to be in agony. His curls were smoothed neatly back, his face cold and inscrutable. Not a trace of regret flickered across his face as Janelle's words hung in the air. A few viewers in the gallery gasped softly. Some whispered among themselves. It wasn't just a trial. It was a public reckoning for one of reality television's most notorious families. The family everyone thought they knew for years. The Browns had been depicted as the epitome of plural marriage bliss on Sister Wives, breezy family meals, large, boisterous holidays. Kody in the middle, the charming patriarch keeping his sprawling brood together. But off camera, a different tale altogether. As the show went on, cracks started appearing. The audience witnessed tensions increasing, particularly between Kody and his older siblings. But no one could have anticipated it to come to this, to a courtroom, to a mother over her son's grave, demanding answers. Now that meticulously crafted image of family unity was destroyed, and the world watched it crumble piece by agonizing piece. Rows of journalists crowded the back of the courtroom. Click, click, click of cameras never stopped. A persistent drumbeat. This trial wasn't an individual family tragedy. It was a media tempest, with all the networks reporting on it. Hashtags were trending on social media already. #Justice for Garrison, #Brown family trial, and #Kody exposed. The judge, a severe woman with steel gray hair and an authoritative presence, held up a hand to quiet the murmurs. "Order in the court," she declared sternly, her voice ringing out in the room. The gossip came to a sudden halt. The divide between the wives seated at the plaintiff's table was Christine Brown, Janelle's best friend, her complexion white but her eyes blazing with determination. Beside her sat Meri Brown, hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring fixedly at the table as if she could not possibly look up. Seated behind them were some of Garrison's siblings, their faces a combination of sorrow and outrage. Some were sobbing softly. Others sat stiff, faces impassive. Christine leaned forward to Meri and whispered, "Finally, it's happening. The truth comes out." Meri did not answer. She only kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, her face a mask of silent ruin. Meri had kept quiet for years, being faithful to Kody even when it tore her apart. But today, sitting here, she seemed like a woman with a lifetime of secrets on her head. And then there was Robyn Brown, sitting beside Kody. She held his hand tightly, her knuckles white, her face pressed in desperation. To outsiders, she appeared to be a loyal wife holding together her marriage. But to the other wives and kids, she was a painful reminder of all that had failed. When Kody looked at Robyn, his face softened for the barest instant. Then, just as fast, it came back. The rift was obvious. On one side of the table sat Janelle, Christine, Meri, and several of the older children. On the other side sat Kody and Robyn. A family divided right down the middle, and Garrison caught in the middle of it. Why they were really here. This wasn't an average trial. Nobody accused Kody of physically abusing Garrison. No weapon, no violent act. But to Janelle and her followers, they felt that emotional neglect was just as lethal. Years of favoritism, years of being ignored, dismissed and marginalized. Years of Kody making some of his children believe they weren't worth his time. Garrison had borne that burden in silence, until the silence became unbearable. The evening he died, he sent a last message, an aching text to Janelle, that would become the foundation of this case. "Mom," the text said, "I'm exhausted from struggling to find a space in this family. Perhaps if I vanish, Dad will finally see me. The jury had already heard that message. Several of them had wept when it was read into evidence during pre-trial hearings. It wasn't only evidence. It was the last appeal of a son for love. The courtroom atmosphere tension permeated the courtroom like a heavy mist as the trial commenced. Garrison's military portrait rested on an easel beside the judge's bench. His smile seemed to guard each of them, a reminder in silence of what was lost. The judge cleared her throat. We will now hear testimony on the emotional and psychological circumstances of Robert Garrison Brown's untimely death. Her voice was steady, but there was an inescapable sharpness beneath it. A burden that informed every person in the room how grim this was. For a moment nobody moved. Then, slowly Janelle advanced. She advanced with a combination of strength and vulnerability, as a woman who carried both intolerable sorrow and unyielding determination. Her footsteps were like thunder, a sound that appeared to thump directly into the chest of Kody. When she came to the stand, she swiveled to address the courtroom. My son wasn't perfect. She started, her voice shaking. He made errors, but he was worthy of love. He was worth feeling like he counted. And in place of that, he felt like a burden. Janelle glanced around the room and fixed her gaze on Kody. For years I pleaded with Kody to appear for our children. I pleaded with him to listen, to call, to just be present, and each time he had an excuse. Kody fidgeted in his chair but remained silent. Robyn gripped his hand firmly. When Garrison enlisted in the National Guard, he hoped, maybe finally, just maybe, his dad would be proud of him. Janelle went on, her cheeks streaked with tears. But even that, the phone calls didn't materialize. The visits never occurred. Her voice cracked as she raised her son's last photo. This is the last photo I ever took of him while he was alive. And when I look at it, I don't see just my son. I see a young man shouldering pain no one should have to bear alone. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the judge blinked frantically, her professional demeanor momentarily breaking. The moment of impact, Christine held a tissue, tears streaming down her face. Meri, still pale, at last raised her head, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears. Behind them, one of Garrison's sisters, Gwen, wept softly into her hands. Robyn bristled with anger, talking rapidly to Kody, who sat as rigid as a statue, his face unmoving. The tension was agonizing. Reporters wrote furiously, already drafting tomorrow's headlines. At last the judge spoke. The court recognizes the richness of the sorrow before us today, she said cautiously. You will go forward with testimony from everyone. But let it be understood. This is a case about responsibility, about whether emotional abandonment can inflict wounds as profound as any bodily injury. The words echoed like a challenge. This was more than a trial. It was a fight for the very definition of what it means to be a parent. Janelle returned to her seat, her head held high, even as her body trembled. Christine reached over and squeezed her hand. We're doing this for him, Christine whispered. For Garrison, Janelle nodded, her eyes never leaving Kody. And then, with the room in collective held breath, the first witness was summoned. The war over Garrison's memory, and over the truth regarding the Brown family, had begun officially. The judge's tone was firm but soothing. Mrs. Brown, come on up. Janelle rose slowly, her hands shaking as she clutched Garrison's framed picture. It was the same photograph she'd been holding onto before, Garrison in his National Guard uniform, his smile shining, his stance proud. But the longer she gazed at it, the more she could see the agony behind that grin. The courtroom was still except for the crisp click of a reporter's camera. Janelle's heels rang against the hardwood floor as she walked to the witness stand. Every step was like stepping through memories. Birthday parties, graduations, times of laughter, and times of tears. When she sat down and put her hand on the Bible to be sworn in, tears had already accumulated in her eyes. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? The bailiff questioned. I do, Janelle whispered, barely audible. When she finally turned to look at the courtroom, her suffering was clear to everyone. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, feeling that what was about to come would cut to the bone. A mother's first words. My son Garrison was my light. Janelle started, her voice trembling but firm. He wasn't just my child. He was my friend, my protector, my fighter. From the day he was born, he brought joy into my life. He had this way of making everyone laugh, even in the darkest times. Her lips trembled as she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. But over the last few years, that light began to fade. Not because of anything Garrison did, but because of what he went through in this family, because of what he endured at the hands of his own father. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Christine reached over and tightly held Meri's hand. Meri didn't pull away, though her eyes were wide with emotion. Kody's face remained stone cold, but a muscle flicked in his jaw. Robyn leaned in close to him, whispering something, but he didn't react. Years of neglect. Janelle's voice grew stronger as she went on. Garrison grew up in a family of 18 children. That sort of family has difficulties. I knew that when I took this path. But every child still deserves to be loved. Every child deserves to be told they matter. Her gaze fixed on Kody. And somewhere along the way, Kody forgot that. Kody finally raised his eyes, catching hers for a fleeting moment before dropping them again. Janelle didn't blink. He began showing favoritism. Some children received attention, presents, and time. Others received leftovers. Bits and pieces here. A phone call there. Garrison was one of the ones forgotten. Her voice cracked, but she compelled herself to continue. He attempted to earn his father's love. He worked so hard. When he enlisted in the National Guard, he hoped it would finally please Kody. He figured if he served his country, if he became a man any father would be proud to call son, then maybe Kody would look at him. Janelle brandished a printed photograph of Garrison standing at attention in his uniform, tears running down her face. But even then, the phone never rang, the visits never came, and when Garrison asked why, he was informed his father was busy. The room was so silent it seemed as if people were holding their breath. The final text message. Then Janelle pulled out of her purse a crumpled piece of paper. Her hands trembled so violently that Christine had to assist her in unfolding it. This, Janelle held it up, is the last text my son ever sent me. The judge indicated she should go on. Reporters leaned forward, anxious to get every word. Janelle read the words aloud, her voice breaking. Mom, I'm tired of fighting for a place in this family. Maybe if I disappear, Dad will finally notice me. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Some jurors covered their mouths. Others closed their eyes, visibly shaken. Behind Janelle, Gwen let out a sob, so loud it echoed through the room. Christine wrapped her arms around her, rocking her gently as tears streamed down both their faces. Even the judge appeared momentarily shocked. She composed herself in a hurry, but her eyes grew soft with sympathy. Janelle held the paper to her chest, as if grasping her son's last words would somehow keep him near. My boy died thinking he didn't matter, she wept. He died thinking that he wasn't worth the love of his father. No parent should ever have to bury a child who thought that. The confrontation. Kody's lawyer stood. Objection, Your Honor, he replied suavely. That is an emotional statement, not evidence. The judge gave him a glare. Overruled. Sit down. The attorney grudgingly sat. Janelle faced Kody again, her anger rising now. You did it, Kody. Maybe not with your hands, but with your decisions. You ignored him. You turned your back on him when he needed you most. Kody's voice was finally sharp and defensive. I didn't leave Garrison. He repelled me. Janelle's breath stalled. Repelled you? He was a child who pleaded for his father's love. The judge pounded her gavel. Order, both of you. Keep your tempers in check. The room dissolved into pandemonium. Journalists frantically scribbling, cameras popping like firework, whispers swelling into a deafening din. When silence finally reasserted itself, Janelle's whisper was like a knife cut. You picked Robyn's kids. You picked one family out over the rest of us. And Garrison paid the price. Robyn gasped, her anger-filled face reddening. That is not fair, she exclaimed. I loved Garrison as if he were my own. Christine turned around, her tone icy. No, Robyn, you loved Kody, and you defended him. Always him, while the rest of our children struggled. The judge's gavel crashed again, harder this time. Enough. If there is another outburst, I will clear this courtroom. Everyone was quiet, although the tension was still charged. The breakdown Janelle's resolve finally broke. Her shoulders began to shake as she held the picture of Garrison to her chest and collapsed into a sobbing fit. Christine rushed over to her, kneeling at her side. "It's okay, Janelle," Christine whispered. "Let it out. He deserves to be remembered." The jury sat in silent horror, their eyes a combination of outrage and sorrow. Meri, who had been quiet this whole time, finally did speak. Her voice was gentle, but it rang through the room like a bell. "She's right," Meri whispered, crying uncontrollable tears. "We all saw what was going on. We didn't say anything, because it was simpler than confronting the truth. But Garrison deserved better than that. They all did." For the first time, Kody's stoic mask broke. His lips quivered, his eyes shone, but he too turned away, burying his face in his hands. A mother's final plea. Janelle stood once more, her face flushed and tear-stained, but her voice firm. "Your Honor," she addressed the judge, "this case isn't about revenge. It's about justice. My son may be dead, but his story isn't over. If we let this be swept under the rug, if we pretend that this was just some terrible accident, then we're telling every abused child out there that their pain doesn't matter." She held up Garrison's photo high, so everyone could see. "I will fight for my son's memory. I will fight for every kid who's ever felt invisible, because Garrison was worthy of a father's love." And instead, he received silence. The courtroom broke into cheers. Before the judge could slam her gavel down to bring order, even some jurors dabbed at tears in their eyes. When Janelle left the stand, Christine and Gwen hugged her tightly. "We're proud of you," Christine whispered. "And Garrison would be too." Janelle nodded, her eyes never leaving Kody. The message was clear. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as the next witness prepared to take the stand, the stakes had never been higher. The judge's gavel struck the bench sharply. "Next witness, please." The bailiff called out. "Christine Brown, please take the stand." Christine rose slowly from her seat. Her fingers shook as she smoothed out her skirt, but her chin was high. She strode to the witness stand, with quiet determination, her footsteps steady despite that tears brimmed in her eyes. The air in the room changed. If Janelle's testimony had been one of heartbreak, Christine's was one of truth. Ugly, painful, and long concealed. The weight of secrets. As Christine walked towards the stand, Kody's gaze was on her, narrowed and chill. Robyn clutched his arm hard, muttering something quietly, but he didn't react. Christine cast a quick glance at the jury, then Janelle, who nodded to her slightly, encouragingly. She finally sat down, putting one hand on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth? And nothing but the truth? So help you God?" the bailiff asked. "I do," Christine said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. When she looked up again, her eyes locked directly on Kody. The room seemed to hold its breath. Opening words, Christine took a deep breath, then began. "I was Kody's third wife for over 2 decades. When I first joined this family, I believed in the dream of unity, equality, and shared love. I truly thought we were building something special." Her voice wavered slightly, but she pushed on. "But that dream was a lie." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, her interest clearly piqued. Christine's expression hardened. Behind closed doors, Kody was a much different man than what you saw on TV. To the outside world, he was the doting father and husband, the man who could do it all. But behind the scenes, he was a picky one. He was selective about who he liked, and he didn't even bother to conceal it. Kody's favoritism exposed. Christine stood facing the jury, her voice growing louder. When Robyn came into the family, it all changed. Suddenly she and her kids were Kody's whole world. The rest of us, me, Janelle, Meri, and our children, we were pushed aside like we didn't exist. Robyn's mouth fell open. "That's not true," she cried, jumping to her feet. The judge slammed his gavel. "Mrs. Brown, sit down, or you will be removed from this courtroom." Robyn slumped back in her chair, red-faced and trembling, while Kody glared at Christine with barely suppressed rage. Christine did not blink. She went on, her voice unyielding. "My children saw. Janelle's children saw. Everyone did. It was impossible not to notice. Kody spent nights with Robyn, while my children waited by the window expecting their father's car to arrive. Sometimes they'd sit there for hours, and he never showed up. Christine cried. Now, tears streaming down her face. But she didn't finish. Do you have any idea what it does to a child to feel that kind of rejection? To know their father chose someone else's children over them. It kills them piece by piece. The agony of seeing Garrison disappear. Christine's voice broke when she said Garrison's name aloud for the first time. Garrison, he was like a second son to me. When Janelle couldn't be there, I stepped in. He was kind, funny, and brave. But over the past few years, I watched him change. She paused, trying to steady herself. The courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Initially he attempted to fight for his father's affection. Christine went on quietly. He stood up to Kody, demanded to know why he never came over, why he never called. But each time he dared to protest, Kody labeled him disrespectful and ungrateful. Christine wiped her tears, her hands shaking. No, Garrison was not disrespectful. He was desperate. Desperate to be seen, to be heard, to count. Her voice broke completely, as she whispered, and the more Kody ignored him, the more Garrison faded. Janelle sobbed quietly at the plaintiff's table, clutching a tissue in both hands. Gwen, seated behind her, buried her face in Christine's shoulder for comfort. The fight that changed everything. Christine's tone shifted, becoming sharper, more direct. There was one night, a night I'll never forget. The jury leaned forward, hanging on every word. Garrison had invited Kody to one of his National Guard ceremonies, begging him to attend. It was a milestone day for him. But Kody did not attend. He attended dinner with Robyn's children instead. Christine's voice was shaking with anger. When Garrison got wind of it, he was devastated. He said, "Mom, no matter what I do, he'll never pick me." She turned and glared straight at Kody. That was the night something in him snapped. And you didn't even care. Kody's face went red. That's a lie, he yelled, slapping his hand on the table. The judge's gavel clanged wildly. Order, Mr. Brown, calm yourself. The room hummed with tension. Cameras clicked madly. Christine, not deterred, continued. The following morning, Garrison informed me he had no idea how much longer he could keep faking it. A few weeks after that, he died. The final words hung like smoke. Christine versus Robyn. Robyn's eyes brimmed with tears. She rose again, getting out of control. The steam sign recant. Whine Kody for this, she wailed. He loved Garrison in his own way. He tried. Christine whirled around, anger replacing her sorrow. The Steens tried, she exclaimed. Love's not a word you say, Robyn. Love's being there. It's phone calls. It's midnight conversations. When your child can't sleep. Kody didn't try. He abandoned Garrison. And you were there for him while he did it. Robyn buried her face in her hands and wept. Kody wrapped his arm around her, glaring at Christine as if he wanted to shut her up for good. The jury observed this display with wide eyes, obviously shaken by the naked emotions flowing out into the courtroom. The greater truth. Christine turned to the jury once more, her voice steadier now but full of unshakable certainty. This isn't about Garrison, she said quietly. It's about all the children in this household, who grew up feeling less than. Every child who lay in bed and asked why their dad didn't come home that evening. Every child who thought, if only I was a little bit better, he might love me. She breathed. I walked away from this marriage because I wouldn't let my daughters grow up thinking that's what love is. But even after I was gone, I just kept watching. I saw the same things, the same hurt, and nobody stopping it. Christine's eyes swept across the courtroom, meeting the eyes of each juror. We can't bring Garrison back, but we can hold Kody responsible. We can let the world know that emotional neglect is a reality, and it can be as lethal as any physical abuse. The courtroom responds. No one stirred for an instant. Christine's words hung there, heavy in the air. Then very quietly, someone in the audience started to weep. Others followed, the sound passing through the courtroom in ripples. Janelle buried her face in her hands, sobbing openly. Gwen hugged her tightly, whispering through tears. We're telling his story, Mom. We're finally telling it. Even a few jurors wiped at their eyes, visibly shaken. Kody sat motionless, his face pale and tight, his hands clenched into fists. For the first time, his confident facade seemed to crack, if only slightly. Christine's final blow. Christine took a stand, her voice firm one final time. Garrison wasn't just another one of Kody's children. He was a young man, with aspirations, with a future, and he needed a father who'd fight for him, not one who walked away. She looked at Kody, her words biting. You let him down. You let them all down. And now you get to live with that. The room was in an uproar. Gasps of shock, wails, screams, the angry snapping of cameras. The judge slammed her gavel over and over, attempting to regain control. Order in the court, she bellowed. Gradually the commotion subsided, leaving only the heavy breathing of Christine. The judge addressed Christine. Thank you for your testimony. You may step down. Christine returned to the plaintiff's table, where Janelle stood up at once to hug her. The two women held each other close, their mutual grief holding them fast like steel. Behind them, Gwen whispered through sobs, "You were so brave, Mom." Christine nodded, her eyes never leaving Kody. For the first time, he averted his eyes. The judge surveyed the pages of her notes, then spoke to the room. The court will now be in recess, for a brief time before calling the next witness. As the jury exited, the gallery hummed with emotion. Christine's testimony had not been mere words. It was a revelation, one that shook the entire room and made way for what was yet to come. The fight was not over yet, but finally the truth had been said. The doors of the courtroom creaked shut as the people regained their seats. After recess, reporters hushed, their cameras at the ready. The tension in the room had changed. Christine's testimony had been explosive, and everyone knew the next witness could either seal the case or collapse under the pressure. At the plaintiff's table, Janelle grasped a tissue, her eyes puffy and red from weeping. Christine sat next to her, still shaking slightly from her testimony, but providing support to her friend. Meanwhile, on the other side of the aisle, Kody and Robyn sat huddled together. Robyn spoke in hushed, frantic tones, but Kody's face was like granite, his jaw clenched so tightly it appeared painful. The bailiff's voice boomed across the room. The court will now hear from Gwen Brown. The room grew quiet. The walk to the stand, Gwen got up slowly. At just 22, she looked both fragile and fierce, like someone who had survived a storm, but still bore the scars. Her hands shook as she smoothed the front of her simple navy dress. The entire Brown family turned to watch her. Some of her siblings sobbed quietly. Others couldn't even meet her gaze. Christine whispered, "You've got this, baby." As Gwen passed her, Gwen nodded, but didn't say anything. Every step toward the witness stand seemed to weigh more than the last. This was her time, not only to testify on her own behalf, but on behalf of every sibling who had been silenced, every child who had ever felt invisible. When she got to the stand, the bailiff held out the Bible. "Do you promise to tell the truth, the entire truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," Gwen answered quietly, yet her words were heard in the hushed courtroom. She leaned back in her chair, her posture straight, and drew in a trembling breath. As she finally met Kody's gaze, her eyes remained fixed upon him. For a moment, something crossed Kody's expression. Guilt, anger, fear. It was lost in an instant, replaced by his characteristic armor of insensitivity. Opening words. The forgotten daughter Gwen clutched the side of the witness stand, hard, her knuckles pale. "My name is Gwen Brown," she started, her voice shaking. "I am Kody Brown's daughter. But for most of my life, it didn't feel that way." A spasm of whispers moved through the courtroom. "People see my dad as this huge family man, with a million children and an enormous heart to love us all," Gwen said with anger. "That's what the TV show presented. But that's not the reality. Not for me. Not for many of us." She looked towards Christine and Janelle, taking encouragement from their tearful, supportive faces. "My dad, he favored some. And if you were not among them, you didn't exist. You were invisible in your own house." A life of being ignored. Gwen's voice began to tear up,
but it became stronger as she continued. I remember birthdays he didn't show up for. Graduations that he didn't cheer me on at, because he wasn't even in attendance. Nights when I waited by the window for his car to pull up, but it never did. A sob came from somewhere in the gallery. Reporters wrote furiously with each word. Gwen stopped, caught breath. Do you know how it feels to sit in a busy house, full of brothers and sisters, and still be totally alone? To see your dad hug other children, laugh with them, while you stand there thinking that there's something wrong with you. She shook her head slowly. I began to think I wasn't lovable.
She addressed Robyn directly now. Your kids had his time, his love, his attention. The rest of us received excuses. Robyn's face collapsed, tears streaming down her face. That's not fair, Gwen, she choked. Your dad, he tried, no, he didn't. Gwen cracked, her tone cold and hard, with years of bottled anger. Trying is getting there. Trying is giving a damn. He didn't try for me, he didn't try for Garrison. He didn't try for so many of us. The judge's gavel cracked. Order, Mrs. Brown. You will not cut off the witness again. Robyn clapped her hand over her mouth, crying silently as Gwen addressed the jury once again. The last conversation with Garrison. The atmosphere in the courtroom became thick as Gwen's face fell apart. The last time I talked to my brother, she whispered, her voice cracking. He phoned me late at night. He sounded different, wary, despondent. Christine buried her face, quietly weeping. Janelle's body shuddered as she gripped Christine's hand. Gwen breathed deeply, her shoulders shaking. Garrison said he felt as though he were yelling into a vacuum, as though no one was listening. Certainly not Dad. She swiveled her tear-tracked face toward Kody. He told me, Gwen, regardless of what I do, he will never care. He will never notice me. The whole courtroom came to a complete hush. Even the journalists dipped their pens, their eyes dull with tears. Gwen's voice lowered to a whisper. I said I knew, because I felt the same my entire life. Gasps circulated through the courtroom. I said we had each other, that we'd get through. But, her voice cracked entirely, and she wept into her hands. A couple of days later, he passed away. Janelle burst into Christine's arms, crying out loud. Even a few jurors dabbed at tears in their eyes. Facing Kody, the breaking point. When Gwen finally stood up again, her anger had replaced her sorrow. She pointed straight at Kody. You weren't just an absent father, she yelled, her words ringing off the walls of the courtroom. You made us think we were the issue. You made us feel like we weren't good enough for you to love. Kody slammed his hands down on the table and sprang to his feet. You don't know what you're talking about, he thundered. I tried my best. You thankless little, sit down, Mr. Brown, the judge shouted, banging her gavel. The courtroom was pandemonium. Gasps, shouts, flashes of cameras, but Gwen's voice pierced through it all. Garrison died believing he wasn't worthy of you. She shrieked, crying openly, and deep down, I know you knew what he was feeling. You just didn't care enough to fix it. The jury reacts. The jury sat stonily, their faces a mask of shock and despair. A number of them wiped at their eyes. One older juror shook his head slowly, visibly overcome by Gwen's words. Another, a young mother, had a clearly angry face. Her jaw clenched tight as she glared at Kody. Every word Gwen had spoken hit like a hammer, especially because it came from someone so young, so raw, and so painfully honest. Gwen's final words. Gwen's chest heaved as she tried to calm herself. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, but every syllable was razor-sharp. I'm not here to ruin anyone's reputation, she said softly. I'm here because my brother is worthy of justice, because every forgotten child in this family needs their hurt to be recognized. She turned again to Kody, once more. You can sit there and tell yourself you did your best, but I was there. I lived it, and so did Garrison. A lone tear slid down her face. You failed us, Dad, and you don't get to hide from that anymore. The courtroom explodes. The instant Gwen stopped talking, the room burst apart. Some men yelled with rage, others cried out openly. Reporters screamed out questions. As cameras snapped wildly, the judge bashed her gavel again and again, yelling, Order, order! Gradually, the pandemonium subsided. The judge spoke to Gwen, her voice softer now. Thank you for your testimony, Miss Brown. You may proceed down. Gwen made her way back toward Christine and Janelle, her knees trembling. As soon as she could get to them, Christine swept her into a tight hug. You were so brave, Christine sobbed. Garrison would be so proud of you. Janelle hugged them both, the three women holding on to one another like lifelines. Kody's silence. At the defense table, Kody sat stiffly, his face white. For once he had no words. Robyn cried next to him, saying in a whisper, Kody, do something, please. But Kody did not budge. For the first time, his control mask had broken, and all the people in the room could witness it. The truth was out, and it couldn't be taken back. The judge's closing remarks. When the jury left, still clearly shaken, the judge spoke to the courtroom. This trial is not just about one family. It's about the invisible wounds that emotional neglect can inflict. She stopped, her voice laden with meaning. We will resume tomorrow with this case. Court is adjourned. The gavel hit hard. The courtroom cleared slowly, but the words of Gwen resonated like a haunting harmony, a reminder that once some truths are spoken, they can never be silenced. The courthouse the next morning was filled with a tidal wave of reporters, cameras and curious bystanders. The trial had overnight become a national phenomenon. Top headlines blazed across every news channel. Sister wives scandal. Kody Brown on trial for emotional neglect. Garrison's voice lives on through his family's testimonies. The Brown family implodes in courtroom drama. Inside the courtroom, the tension hung thick in the air. No one dared to speak more than a whisper. Even the reporters were subdued, their fingers trembling over their keyboards. The last day had finally come. This was it. The moment everyone had been waiting for. The family arrives. The Brown family went into court as a group, but their solidarity was broken irretrievably. Janelle entered first, clinging to Christine's hand for support. Her face was wan, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep and constant crying. Gwen followed them, shoulders set, refusing to break after her passionate testimony. Meri trailed back, her expression impassive, a blend of grief and subdued fury. And lastly, Kody and Robyn. Kody's head was held high, but his movements were stiff, forced. Robyn gripped his arm, whispering hysterically, her mascara smudged by tears. The crowd sat in silence as they took their places. The judge's warning. The judge appeared, black robe flowing behind her like a dark shadow. When she sat, she surveyed the room with keen, piercing eyes. Today, we finish this trial, she started. I demand total silence and respect as the verdict is read. Any disruption will mean prompt ejection from this courtroom. Her words suspended over the room like a threat. Even the flash of camera lights stopped. The jurors entered, their faces serious and fatigued. It was evident that they had all been deeply moved by the testimonies they heard. The tension builds. Christine reached out and took Janelle's hand. Both women shook, preparing for what was to come. It's going to be okay, Christine whispered, her own voice shaking. No matter what occurs, we spoke the truth. Gwen sat between them, her eyes fixed ahead. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She simply waited. Several rows over, Kody shifted awkwardly, his fists so tightly clenched that his knuckles shone white. Robyn leaned on him, whispering desperately, but he didn't answer. For the first time ever, Kody was small, defeated. The verdict is read. The judge smiled at the foreperson of the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor, the foreperson said. A thick silence dropped over the courtroom as a slip of paper was passed to the judge. She read it slowly, her face inscrutable. Finally she stood and spoke to the court. In the case of Janelle Brown against Kody Brown, on charges of emotional neglect and wrongful death by indirect action, the room stopped breathing. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kody Brown. Christine clutched Janelle's hand harder. Gwen's fingernails bit into her palms. Robyn pressed her face against Kody's shoulder, muttering a desperate prayer, guilty of emotional neglect and psychological harm. The explosion. The courtroom exploded like a bomb had been detonated. Reporters sprang to their feet, yelling questions. Lightning flashed from camera strobes. Gasps, sobs, and shouts filled the air. Order! Order! The judge bellowed, slamming her gavel again and again. But nobody was listening. Christine dissolved, weeping in Janelle's arms. Gwen hugged her mother and Christine, whispering through tears, "We did it. We finally told the world." Meri sat stony-eyed, tears running silently down her face. Years of hurt, betrayal and silence flowed out of her without one word said. Robyn screamed across the aisle. No, this isn't right, he is a good father. Her voice broke as she addressed the judge. You don't get it, you're destroying this family. The judge slammed her gavel down harder. Mrs. Brown, sit down or you will be removed. But Robyn slumped into tears, holding onto Kody's arm for support. Kody's breakdown. Kody didn't stir. He didn't blink. His face was white, his breathing strained. For the first time ever, his tough exterior had crumbled utterly. At last he whispered, more or less under his breath. I didn't do anything wrong. Gwen stood up, shaking with fury. That's the problem, she shrieked, pointing at him. You never believed you were wrong. You just kept hurting us and telling yourself it was love. The judge brought her gavel down. Miss Brown, get hold of yourself. But Gwen couldn't. Garrison deserved a father who noticed him. You didn't even notice when he was crumbling. Kody spun on her in a rage, his face twisted in pain and anger. I loved him. I did love him. Gwen's voice cracked as she yelled back. Then why wasn't that enough to save him? The whole room fell silent. Even the cameras came to a halt. Kody slumped back in his chair, his hands over his face. His shoulders quivered as sobs racked his body. For the first time, everybody saw him not as a dominating patriarch, but as a shattered man who had lost his son and ruined his family along the way. The judge's last words. When finally the frenzy subsided, the judge's voice rang out, cool but unrelenting. Mr. Brown, this is not a verdict to punish you for one act. It is a recognition of a cycle of harm. Emotional abuse doesn't leave bruises, but it leaves scars all the same. Scars that can last a lifetime, or in this case take one. She gazed straight at Kody. You failed your fatherly responsibility, and today, this court holds you to answer. Sentencing. The judge breathed deeply before going on. This court sentences you to mandatory family therapy, public admission of wrongdoing, and restitution in the form of paying for mental health services for endangered youth. Robyn's mouth fell open. That's it? He didn't murder anyone, she wailed. The judge glared at her. Mrs. Brown, this isn't about physical harm. This is about healing a community and avoiding other tragedies, like Garrison's. She turned back to Kody. Also, you are commanded to make no public media appearances on behalf of the family for a duration of 3 years. Effective right away. Gasps resounded once more. Kody's public persona, his fame, was being taken from him. The aftermath. As the judge recessed the court, Christine hugged Gwen and Janelle tightly. We did it, Christine whispered between tears. We gave Garrison a voice. Janelle nodded, tears streaming across her face. He'll never be forgotten, not now. Gwen was still shaking, glancing over at Kody. He was slumped in his chair, his face buried in his hands. Robyn crying next to him. For an instant a pang of sympathy hit her. Then she recalled Garrison's last words. Maybe if I vanish, Dad will finally notice me. Her sympathy hardened into steel. You're noticing him now, don't you, Dad? She whispered to herself. Outside the courthouse, the family came out into a torrent of flashing cameras and yelled questions. Reporters surged, their voices one on top of another. Christine, what do you think of the verdict? Janelle, what is justice for Garrison now? Kody, do you have any comment on being convicted? Kody did not respond. He kept his head bent as security ushered him and Robyn to a waiting vehicle. Christine, on the other hand, faced the cameras. Her tone was strong, resolute, and charged with soft power. This trial wasn't just for us, she stated. It was about all the children who have ever felt unseen and unwanted, or forgotten. Today we demonstrated that their suffering is real, and we will continue fighting for them. The crowd cheered. The final moment as Christine, Janelle, Gwen and Meri departed together. Hand in hand, Christine turned back to glance at the courthouse for the last time. This isn't the end, she breathed. It's the beginning of healing. High above, the courthouse flag waved gently in the wind. A beacon of justice served at last. And somewhere, in the still place where memories reside, Garrison's spirit appeared to glow a little brighter. For the first time in years, his family wasn't quiet anymore. They had said something, and the world had listened.